A Fox News alert on the investigation into the horrible events in Las Vegas, the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history. With the gunman's motive still an elusive mystery as police and FBI agents try to learn why a 64-year-old retired accountant with no criminal record opened fire on a country music concert Sunday night, killing 59 innocent people. Good morning to you. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Melissa Francis. Investigators not only at the crime scene, but also at Paddock's home, looking to find out what turned Stephen Paddock into a mass murderer. So far, police recovering nearly 24 guns from his hotel room and finding 19 more at his home, along with explosives and thousands of rounds of ammunition. But the investigation doesn't end there, with police now planning to talk to this woman. This is Mary Lou Danley. When she returns to the U.S., they want to ask her. She was the gunman's girlfriend. While not a suspect herself, they are hoping that she will be able to shed light on Paddock's motive. In the meantime, tales of heroism are emerging from the night of deadly shooting, which could have been even worse had it not been for the quick action of some brave first responders.
But for the fact of the great work done by the men and women of Metro and the security at Mandalay Bay, we would have lost hundreds, if not thousands, more lives. I mean, they were able to triangulate and locate that room and get people in there and saved countless lives. And for that, we will be eternally grateful.
Yeah, and thank God for that. Adam Housley is live in Las Vegas. Adam, what's the latest?
Yeah, Melissa, you know, that room they're talking about is one of 3 distinct crime scenes. We have the room, of course, you have the area below where the concert was taking place, and you have the suspect's house, or the gunman's house, I should say, which is 90 miles north of here. The investigation is still ongoing here. I'll step away, give you a live look this morning now that the sun's up here in Las Vegas. We did see an ambulance leave very early this morning here, presumably taking one of the bodies away. We believe that, if not all, very much close to all have been removed here, but there's still a very active investigation going at the location, as well as up in the room. About 10:30 last night, you could still see flashes in the hotel room up there, those 2 holes in the windows, of course, revealing the flashes on the inside. We have some exclusive video, too, of that room from 1 year ago that was taken by a friend of ours that was here to go to the same concert and decided to take his phone out like most people would do and show off the 2-room suite that overlooked everything. And you can actually see him walk into the room, show off the room, and you can see the windows basically go all across the front of that room, and both those rooms, I should say, because it's a 2-room suite, and look down on to the actual site where the concert took place unobstructed, and showed two different angles of that unobstructed view as well. And as we see this information come in, we see this video, we hear more from eyewitnesses that talked about what it was like in the aftermath and during the gunfire. Take a listen.
I drag her down because you don't want to be moving during that. You want to stay still because he's firing at moving objects. That's what he's doing. Anybody laying down, it doesn't mean anything to him. So in my opinion, that's just my opinion. So every time he stops, I get up and I move. Every time it starts, hunker down.
You just don't know if you're going to make it. Like, he's not shooting with, a 45. Like, he has an automatic rifle. Like, those shots don't stop. Like, you don't hear that. It's like being in a war zone.
Like being in a war zone, like hearing firecrackers at the beginning, which kept people from moving at the very initial first shots. We keep hearing these stories, Melissa. Last night we went here locally. I had to grab a jacket because it's cold here early in the morning. I'm buying a jacket at a normal store, and the guy turns to me and says, "Well, what are you buying it for?" I tell him why, and he turns back with tears in his eyes. He says, "I was there." Young guy, probably 23 years old. The girl next to me got shot in the shoulder, and she's going to make it, but it was pretty serious. I mean, to hear these stories that continually come in, to hear from families still trying to find out if their loved ones made it. There's still many people in the hospital here, Melissa, fighting for their lives, and that death number is still at 59 and more than 500 injured. Unfathomable sometimes just to think about the magnitude of what happened here. Back to you in New York.
Wow. Adam Housley, thank you.
So what more do we know about Stephen Paddock, with investigators searching his homes, looking for clues as to what sparked his murderous rampage in Vegas? Right now, they believe he acted alone.
The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is working on 2 fronts to process the crime scene and also investigate the motive of the shooter. Metro has executed a search warrant at the home of Stephen Craig Paddock in Mesquite, Nevada. Detectives are combing through evidence to uncover the motive behind the shooting and any other pertinent information that will help shed light on this horrible event. We have recovered 23 firearms at Mandalay Bay and 19 firearms at his home in Mesquite. I want to emphasize we believe Paddock is solely responsible for this heinous act.
Joining us now, Steve Rogers, a retired lieutenant detective for the Nutley, New Jersey Police Department. He is also a former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. So, Steve, you've investigated a lot of crimes, seen a lot of bad guys out there. Where do you start with a case like this?
Well, motive is very, very important involving this case. Now, there are going to be two things that are going to take place as this investigation moves on. Number one, as an investigator, you always conclude someone else knows something. Whether they're involved in this incident or not, the fact of the matter is there's always someone else who has information they can offer you. And in this case, John, it may be his female friend. Secondly, criminal psychologists and criminal forensic scientists and profilers are going to play a very important role in this investigation because right now, absent any domestic violence issues, any contact with the police, any criminal history, anything to do with law enforcement in his life is making it very, very difficult to conclude as to what reason he had to commit this act. And by the way, there is no evidence of any ideological issues, of any political issues, etc., but that might come up as they move further with these experts in this investigation.
What about physiological? I mean, what about some kind of, brain problem, a tumor or something like that? Can that be explored as a possible reason for this?
Oh, certainly, John, and that will come out as they investigate people who know him. Look, he visited Las Vegas a lot. He probably had a lot of friends who gambled with him. Family, friends, relatives, former employees. Absolutely right, John, but I've got to tell you, my instinct is telling me that his female partner has a lot of information she could offer, and hopefully they'll come to some sort of conclusion through her, at least leading maybe to what the motive was.
There's been a lot of questions about how he could sneak nearly 24 guns into his hotel room. It's Las Vegas. A lot of people play golf. You can fit 5 or 6 long rifles into a golf bag if you want and go get them up the elevator. Nobody's going to ask you a single question.
Well, I've given that some thought. He was there since September 28th, so who knows how many times he went in and out of that hotel room. The other thing is I kind of think about, well, when people went in to clean the room, if they were in fact cleaning the room, did they see these long golf bags, and did anybody think that maybe there's something, in these bags that are not proper? But, there's so much speculation going on, and I think that in the end, the investigation will tell us a lot. How he got these guns, how he got them in there, and what the motive was.
What about his father? His father was a convicted bank robber, escaped from prison, considered armed and dangerous by the FBI. There are some reports that he was a diagnosed psychopath. Now, will authorities? How do you explore the DNA, I guess, that comes from a father like that?
Well, this is where your criminal psychologists and psychiatrists and profilers will play a very important role. They have the expertise to lead police to some conclusions that maybe, in fact, this was hereditary. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but my point is, this is why it's all in with law enforcement, not just those who are doing the physical and forensic evidence analysis, but also the medical and mental analysis.
What about paying for this investigation? I mean, I know the feds are involved, and the FBI basically has a limitless bankroll, but Las Vegas police are going to be awfully stretched, aren't they?
Yes, they are, but I understand that President Trump has truly committed every single resource possible from the federal government, from manpower to money, etc., to find out why this happened. So I don't think we'll have any worries at that end. The White House is pretty committed to this.
Right now, all we have are questions, and we need some answers. Be good to get them soon. Steve Rogers.
Thank you, John. We'll get those answers.
All right. Hope so. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Fox News alert: the music world mourning a rock and roll legend today. Tom Petty died yesterday after suffering a heart attack at his Malibu home. The dynamic frontman who led the band The Heartbreakers had a career that took him to the top of the charts in the 70s, and he kept on making hits for 4 decades. Songs like Don't Do Me Like That, Free Fallin', American Girl, and I Won't Back Down quickly became staples of the top 40 playlists. Petty had just wrapped up his Heartbreakers 40th anniversary tour last week and was looking forward to spending more time with his granddaughter. Tom Petty was 66 years old.
Love that music. Federal investigators are combing through Stephen Paddock's homes, trying to uncover the motive behind the Las Vegas massacre. More on what we're learning ahead. Plus, President Trump heading to Puerto Rico now after facing more backlash over the humanitarian crisis on the island. The very latest, next.
In Texas and in Florida, we get an A+. And I'll tell you what, I think we've done just as good in Puerto Rico, and it's actually a much tougher situation.
President Trump and the First Lady are en route to Puerto Rico to survey the storm-ravaged island, which is facing a humanitarian crisis. They are set to make their first stop in San Juan for a briefing on relief and rescue efforts. This trip comes amid criticism of the federal government's slow response to the island, which was devastated, of course, by Hurricane Maria. President Trump has repeatedly defended the federal response.
We're doing really well on Puerto Rico. Tremendous progress being made. We're getting the roads open. We're getting a lot of things done, really at a record clip. So we're very happy with that.
Let's bring in our political panel. Joining us now is Lawrence Jones, who is the host of Blaze TV and radio and a conservative commentator, and Michael Starr Hopkins, a Democratic strategist and contributor for The Hill. Lawrence, let me start with you. I mean, you're looking at 95% of the island still without power, 45% only have drinking water at this point. They want to get that number up to 60% by the end of the week. Isn't that all that really matters, is water and power for these people, not politics?
Right, and it shouldn't be about politics. I think people need to remember that Puerto Rico isn't like Florida or Texas. We're talking about a territory that was already having problems with the water and power system before this even hit. We're talking about corruption in the local government. We're talking about workers that were already on strike and increasing debt in that territory. And so when you look at places like Florida and Texas, where the local government really took, and the state took control of the situation, and the federal government assisted, this territory just doesn't have that infrastructure. So you really can't just blame that on the federal government response.
So, Michael, I mean, obviously we have our own reporter on the ground, Geraldo Rivera, who said a lot of the same things, that there was already power lacking in a lot of areas and that there is a lot of corruption in the local government. And maybe that's how this has gotten political, is that, you know, local leaders are forced to defend what the island looked like before the storm even hit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have less of a critique about the actual federal government's response and more of a critique of Donald Trump's response, because I think as the commander-in-chief, one of your chief objectives is also to be the consoler-in-chief during national crises, and this was a crisis. And I think when he, attacked the mayor of San Juan, he was punching down. Was she being political about it? Maybe. But as president, you have to avoid those circumstances.
Come on, Michael. It wasn't a maybe.
Wait, hang on. Let's go one at a time. Hang on, Lawrence. I mean, let's go one at a time. It is true he was punching down. He would say he's punching back, though, that she started it, that she was the one that lashed out first. And maybe she was trying to, preempt the fact that there's going to be a lot of focus on how the government was run before the storm got there.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? I don't think
wait. Let's let Lawrence respond.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, this is the same mayor that had enough time to make this political shirt saying, "Come save us." The world is watching. America is watching. The president is trying to do the best he can, considering the situations that are already in Puerto Rico. But I think this is what the Democrats want. I think they want another Katrina for optics and to rally people. I think that's exactly what you guys want. And so I think it's un-American to do this in this time of trouble. I think the Democrats should be smart about this and come together.
Michael, go ahead and respond.
I think that, I respect you, Lawrence, and we've talked before. That's a ridiculous, irresponsible statement. No one wants another Katrina. Thousands of people died. Thousands upon thousands of people were injured, were harmed, were displaced. That's not what anyone wants. But what we do want, what Democrats and hopefully Republicans want, is a president that thinks before he tweets. That's not tweeting at a golf course during a national crisis. That's not talking about football football players while there's devastation going on with Americans.
But let's talk specifically.
Hang on, let him finish. Go ahead, finish, Michael.
Those are 3.5 million Americans.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we need to remember.
Lawrence, should he have risen above the occasion no matter what anyone else was doing, risen to the occasion?
Well, I think we can say that about Donald Trump on all issues, but that's not him. That's not the type of president he is. He's going to swing back. He's going to talk about issues that he feels like are compassion. I think we would be criticizing Donald Trump all day if it was about the way he handles situations from a social media standpoint or the way he swings back at people.
Yeah. Michael, I mean, a point of agreement there, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, he is who he is, but I think, we all need to fill that vacuum and get rid of some of the hate and try to find a place for love.
Yeah, but at the same time, Lawrence, I mean, this is about getting power and water back to people that are in an American territory. I mean, these are Americans, and it does highlight the fact that this island has gone awry before the storm arrived. Now is a golden opportunity to put things right, maybe put an end to some of the corruption and get them the services that they need. Is that not true?
I totally agree with you, Melissa, but it starts with the people. I keep going back to Florida and Texas because the people got involved, whether it was people getting in boats or people coming across the border from Louisiana and making sure people got products and food and water. It was the people. So if the Puerto Rican people really want to see change, and I think they do want change, then it starts with them, the people. The federal government just can't come and swing it into a territory and tell them what to do in that
Lawrence,
way.
I got to stop you right there because we're out of time, but I personally know so many people who are desperately trying to get goods and anything to their family on the island, and they can't do it because of air traffic, because of all of the other things standing in the way. They can't just get in a car like they could here in the U.S., and they're very frustrated and very much want to help out. And you need the feds to get them in there. So we'll see. We'll pray for everyone in this situation. Thank you both for coming on today. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Melissa.
John.
Turning now to Las Vegas, where authorities are moving forward with their investigation into Sunday night's deadly shooting. Are they any closer to finding the gunman's motive? Plus, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Dunford testifying on Capitol Hill today. What we're learning about the security situations in Afghanistan and South Asia next.
Fox News alert right now on the mysterious attacks against U.S. diplomats in Cuba, with the U.S. now saying there are 22 medically confirmed cases. The symptoms include hearing loss, brain swelling, intense headaches, and a loss of balance. Just days ago, the State Department ordered all non-essential U.S. diplomatic personnel out of Cuba, and today expelled 15 Cuban diplomats to ensure staffing parity. The State Department saying it will only restore staffing levels once the U.S. gets full assurance that the attacks won't continue.
Just in, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Joseph Dunford on Capitol Hill today, defending President Trump's new strategy in Afghanistan and testifying on the threat from North Korea. Let's go to Lucas Tomlinson live at the Pentagon with more. Lucas.
Well, John, despite a hearing on Afghanistan, right off the top, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was asked about President Trump's tweets over the weekend and asking if they undermined his Secretary of State when President Trump said that Tillerson was wasting his time talking to North Korea.
All we're doing is probing. We're not talking with them, consistent with the president's dismay about not talking with them before the time is right. I do not see the divergence as strongly as some have interpreted it. The president, I think, has a responsibility to ensure that we go into this with our eyes wide open.
On Afghanistan, General Dunford blamed the last administration for withdrawing too far, too fast. And just last week, Mattis visited Kabul for the first time since President Trump unveiled a new strategy for Afghanistan. And less than 2 hours after Mattis landed, the Taliban fired more than 40 rockets, including recoilless rifles from close range, raising questions about who tipped them off and about security 16 years since 9/11. The attack lasted over 5 hours and coincided with the anniversary of the Taliban taking Kabul in 1996. And now, more than 3,000 additional U.S. troops are headed back. Now, Mattis says the new troops will be serving closer to the front lines where they can call in more airstrikes. And already more bombs are being dropped on the Taliban. Last month, more bombs fell than any time over the last 5 years. And the U.S. military is fast approaching the total number of bombs dropped in all of 2013. And John, just moments ago, Defense Secretary Mattis was asked if the United States should withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. Mattis answered no. He says the United States should remain a part of this landmark nuclear agreement as the Trump administration faces an October 15 deadline. John?
Thorny issues all around the globe. Lucas Tomlinson, thank you.
A massive investigation now underway into the Las Vegas massacre as authorities also look at how to prevent similar attacks. Those details ahead. Plus, President Trump is on his way to Puerto Rico after facing criticism for the federal response to the devastated island. We are live in San Juan.
The President and First Lady are on their way to meet those in Puerto Rico struggling to recover from Hurricane Maria. FEMA says the situation is getting better by the day, but most of the island still does not have power, and only about half the population has access to clean drinking water. The White House emphasizes the crisis remains a top priority.
The top priority for the federal government is certainly to protect the lives and the safety of those in affected areas and provide life-sustaining services as we work together to rebuild their lives. That's going to be the focus, not just in the conversations tomorrow, but certainly the focus that we've had since this began.
Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, has more now. John?
John, good morning to you. The President and the First Lady should be on the ground any second now in Puerto Rico. It was estimated they should have landed about 11:20, but it looks like they're just on their way in. The President and the First Lady, when they hit the ground, will be meeting with people who were so deeply affected by Hurricane Maria when it roared through Puerto Rico. They'll also meet with first responders, members of the military who are pitching in to help down there, and government officials from both Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The governors of both Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands will be meeting with the President aboard the USS Kearsarge later on today. One of the people that the President is expected to meet with is the mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulín Cruz, who was very critical of the federal response late last week, calling it ineffective. Also being very critical of the acting DHS Secretary, Elaine Duke, saying that her comments that it was good news that the federal government is starting to get some relief supplies into the hardest hit areas of the island was inappropriate, that this is not a good news story. It's a people are dying story. On his way to the helicopter this morning, I asked the President about all that and what he would say to the mayor when he meets her today. Listen here.
I think she's come back a long way, and, I think it's now acknowledged what a great job we've done, and people are looking at that. And in Texas and in Florida, we get an A+, and I'll tell you what, I think we've done just as good in Puerto Rico, and it's actually a much tougher situation. But now the roads are cleared, communication's starting to come back.
Over the weekend, the President took a rhetorical flamethrower to Cruz, accusing her on Twitter of, quote, poor leadership, lumped her in with politically motivated ingrates, and claimed that she has now been told by the Democrats that you must be nasty to Trump. Cruz says that she would be happy to meet with the President and also seems to have shifted her tone on the federal response.
If he asks to meet with me, of course I would meet with him. I mean, anything that can be done and anyone that can listen. Again, I've been quite complimentary of the people from HHS and FEMA. Their heart is in the right place, but we have to cut the red tape.
The President agrees that you've got to cut the red tape when it comes to getting disaster assistance to Puerto Rico, which is why he issued that 10-day waiver in the Jones Act, allowing foreign flag vessels to travel directly between ports in the mainland United States to Puerto Rico. But the President also said this morning, as robust as the federal response has been, more people on the ground there, locals in Puerto Rico, need to get involved. Listen here.
We need their truck drivers. Their drivers have to start driving trucks. We have to do that. So on a local level, they have to give us more help. But I will tell you, the first responders, the military, FEMA, they have done an incredible job in Puerto Rico.
Again, the President and the First Lady should be on the ground very shortly if they haven't arrived in the last couple of minutes, John. We hope to see some of the events live via our portable broadcasting abilities, but with cell service being so spotty down there on the island, I'm not sure that that's going to happen, but we'll do our best to bring it to you live. John?
All right, we will appreciate those efforts. John Roberts at the White House. John, thank you.
Thanks, John.
So just in on the wide-ranging investigation into the Vegas concert massacre, with the FBI downplaying the possibility of international terrorism while they work with police to learn the motive for this deadly rampage. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington. Catherine, what's the focus right now?
Well, Melissa, good morning. A U.S. government official tells Fox News investigators are doing a full review of Stephen Paddock's travel history. They're drilling down on his financial transactions as well as his personal relationships, looking for unusual activity or a sudden dramatic event that points to motive. There does appear to be a significant shift in the way law enforcement is publicly describing the shooter's girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, who was out of the country, with the sheriff telling reporters last night she was recently in Japan and expected back in the United States, where she will be questioned.
I didn't say we were discontinuing the investigation into that female. We are continuing the investigation into that female. There are several questions that need to be answered, similar to what you propose, but she is currently out of the country. We are making arrangements to contact her upon her return.
Authorities say Paddock used Danley's identification at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. An online professional profile, now disabled, said Danley was a gambling and casino professional. A law enforcement source told Fox Danley could be interviewed overseas by an FBI representative known as a legat, suggesting that the Bureau cannot force her return to the U.S., because she is not charged with any crime at this time. With every hour, the investigation expands with 4 active scenes: the hotel suite on the 32nd floor with 2 adjoining rooms where the shooter used scopes and tripods for increased control and accuracy, the country music venue, the shooter's home in Mesquite, as well as a 4th property in northern Nevada. ISIS has released a new video this morning tying itself to the attack, though the FBI continues to discount that international terror connection, Melissa.
Yeah. Catherine Herridge, thank you. Great reporting as always.
For more on this, let's bring in Sergeant Sean Larkin, Tulsa police officer and member of the department's gang unit, also A&E's live PD television show analyst. Sean, do the answers lie with the girlfriend, do you think?
You know, no. It sounds like right now, obviously, that everyone's at a complete loss. Hopefully, she does have some information that she can provide. You know, when she's interviewed, she may be able to provide just that one piece that can explain why this happened.
There are so many questions about the weaponry that he used, 23 guns, I think, found in the hotel room. But each one of those purchases had to pass an FBI background check, right?
That's correct. You know, anytime someone's purchasing a firearm from a gun dealer or broker, you know, there is a wide range of paperwork that's completed. There's background checks conducted. You know, these days you cannot walk into a gun store and walk out with one immediately. It's going to take some time. Obviously, he passed all those background investigations by the FBI. And so they will definitely have to look further into you know, what happened.
So again, at least 30 times the FBI had a chance to look over this guy and kind of comb through his background, comb through maybe his psyche even, and saw no reason to red flag him whatsoever.
Yeah, that's correct. You know, myself and some of my colleagues, other officers, we've talked about these things even before this happened here in Las Vegas, that if you have somebody who is set on doing something similar to this, or even something as simple as a bank robbery or random murder, and if they are just a normal person in society that doesn't raise any red flags, and they don't talk about, you know, what they want to do, their beliefs to anybody else, it is nearly impossible to stop something like this from happening. And unfortunately, that's very possible what's happened here.
He was reclusive. He was, well, he moved around a fair bit, but he also had a lot of money. He does not fit any of the profiles of people who typically do this kind of thing.
Absolutely not. You know, and when these type of things happen across the country, whether at this scale or even much smaller, oftentimes there's neighbors, friends, you know, that are just, as we've heard on this, they say that exact same thing. You know, he was a regular guy. I never suspected this, anything like that. And other times when something happens, you know, people do say, like, yeah, he was odd, or, you know, he made these type of statements. I wish I could have prevented it. And unfortunately, right now, it sounds like we haven't had anything like that come forward yet.
In your time with the gang unit, your time on the police force, have you run across these kinds of cases? I mean, not on this scale, but somebody who just seems to be an ordinary, upstanding citizen who all of a sudden snaps and does something horrific. It's just that in this case, the horrors were inflicted on so many hundreds of people.
You know, definitely not to this scale. You know, some of the things such as robberies, you know, people are in desperate situations that, you know, we as officers or even friends of these people are not aware of. You know, they're facing financial problems or they've got drug addictions, things like that, and they go out and commit crimes, but definitely nothing of this magnitude by any means.
I do like to focus on the positive. This was a horrific event, but based on the number of guns he had, based on the amount of ammunition he had in that room, the SWAT team and even hotel security did a great job of getting up to that 32nd floor room in a hurry and neutralizing the threat before things got even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've heard some of the radio traffic from officers out there at the scene, and, you know, just me being a police officer, you hear the stress in their voices, and I've heard that myself from other officers here in shooting. And it's chaotic. But because of these type of shootings that have happened across the country, unfortunately, over the last 20 years or so, going back to Columbine, is officers across the country, departments of all sizes, we train for active shooters. Sometimes agencies that are larger train by themselves, smaller agencies train together to react to these type of things. And, you know, the goal is to immediately go to where the shooter is and to stop that person. So, you know, officers will put together a team to go towards the threat, putting their lives in danger, and they're going to bypass injured citizens, injured other officers, so they can go to this shooter, stop him immediately, and prevent any other further, loss of lives or injuries.
They did an impressive job this time around.
Very impressive, absolutely.
Sergeant Sean Larkin, Tulsa PD, thank you.
Thank you.
So he was the half-brother of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, who died under very bizarre circumstances. Now we know what really killed him. Plus, the White House mourning those who lost their lives in Las Vegas. We have more on the investigation, including how do we stop these attacks in the future? Can we?
We are getting new information on the murder of the North Korean leader's half-brother, Kim Jong-nam. Back in February, Kim was poisoned with VX nerve gas, a nerve agent, I should say, at Kuala Lumpur Airport in Malaysia. Now a government report confirms his death was the result of acute VX nerve agent poisoning. The poison was found on his face and eyes, also in his bloodstream. The two young women accused of his murder pleaded not guilty yesterday. Prosecutors say they were trained by North Korean agents to smear the nerve agent on Kim Jong-un's half-brother. North Korea denies any involvement in the assassination.
Breaking down the fallout from the Las Vegas concert massacre with the focus on the investigation into what happened and how and if we can prevent similar attacks, especially since Stephen Paddock didn't fit the profile of a mass murderer or a terrorist as far as we know. And those who knew him, like the nephew of his live-in girlfriend, say they never saw this coming.
Didn't seem like he was the type of guy to do that. Just like he just looked after my auntie and that's it.
Just sort of a normal
person.
So this, I guess, comes as a bigger surprise to you as anyone else?
It sketched me out when I saw it. I was like, what the hell?
Joining us now is Bob Strange. He is former co-chair of New York Anti-Terrorism Task Force. He also advises schools on security. Let me start with the enormous stockpile of weapons that this man had, in terms of explosives, the numbers of guns, the ammunition. How, if these things, as we've heard so far, were purchased legally, he passed a background check, it doesn't set off any alarm bells when somebody buys so much stuff?
Well, Melissa, it usually is in combination with other intelligence information, and it is something that ATF looks at on a regular basis. That's alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. That's our federal agency. But also something that the state police look at and regulators in that field with ammunition and those types of weapons. So I'm surprised that this didn't fall under the radar. I'm surprised that it did fall under the radar and it got through. But you take that into consideration with all the other issues that one looks at for something like this.
Yeah. I know you devise security plans for schools. You say that a comprehensive security plan could do something in a situation like this. I mean, explain that. What would you have caught?
Melissa, whether it's a school, we do it for corporations and actually for governments. And it's basically the same philosophy. It's intelligence, it's enforcement, and it's actual security on the street for the things that you miss through your enforcement actions, things that you miss through your intelligence. And those three things working together make it a better and safer environment. And you can do that anywhere. We can do that in hotels if we wanted to. And again, it's just how much the hotels want to do in terms of what type of scrutiny they want to put their guests through and how much the guests want to do. So it's always a balance of trying to do a good job because we have the manpower, we have the tools, and slowing the process down with people.
You know, generally, we just heard at the beginning of this, you know, from the nephew, from somebody that was involved in his life and apparently lived with him. If people in the house don't see the signs, because in so many cases, family members say they did see the signs, they did see somebody get very dark, or they reached out for help, or they heard, but to hear that somebody who knew him well didn't see the signs makes you feel like it would have been very tough to detect, no?
Well, you know, you've got to remember, we don't have all the details yet in this case, and there's still a lot of information out there. The forensic evidence hasn't all been examined. You know, there's other people and other people of interest to the government that have not been interviewed yet. So I don't think the whole story is out. So it's not that I don't believe everyone that's commented. I just want to verify information that is out there and really pull this case together. So there's a lot of loose ends here. Let's wait and conclude that no one knew anything. Let's wait and conclude that he was not tied to any type of an international organization or terrorist group. I think that's all going to be information that we're going to obtain in the very near future.
Yeah, there's a lot we don't know. We definitely don't have a complete picture. Robert Strang, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Melissa.
Fox News alert, Air Force One is on the ground at the Luis Muñoz Air National Guard Base in Puerto Rico. The President and the First Lady have landed there for a personal look at the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria and the attempts at recovery. Of course, the President has taken some heat from the political sphere regarding the nation's response to what's going on in Puerto Rico. He has fired back vociferously, saying that, you know, it's an island, it's hard to get supplies there, and it's hard to get the relief to the people who need it. One of the problems is that so many of the local folks who were afflicted by the hurricane simply aren't there to do the jobs, Melissa. And the truck drivers, the bulldozer operators, the heavy equipment operators, they have needs of their own, trying to help their own families and their own households.
I certainly know a lot of people who have relatives there and have been trying to help them. And the biggest barrier, of course, is the fact that this is an island. You know, I mean, when something happened in Houston or in Florida, people in neighboring states could drive in and help. Even we saw it down in the Keys when that first caravan poured in and they came across the highway and they were coming all the way from California. With Puerto Rico, you know, they need to fly in, they need to boat in, and, you know, we can have lots of supplies here that we want to send to them for help, but they need a way to get there.
There are organizations of private pilots, you know, those who fly light aircraft, even business jets, organizations that have, you know, stand at the ready to, you know, put tons and tons of supplies on board aircraft and fly them into the islands. But the situation on Puerto Rico has been so devastated that many of the airports simply aren't even open yet. They don't have power for the control towers and so forth. So some of those relief efforts that might normally take place, even from individual citizens reaching out to other Puerto Ricans, those things are not able to happen just yet.
Yeah, and our own reporter on the ground, of course, Geraldo Rivera there, and he has pointed out from the beginning that there were a lot of essential services that weren't in place even before the storm, and that's a huge problem when you talk about restoring power to 100% of the island. And there we see the president stepping off and shaking hands as he gets his feet on the ground. People on the island have been very looking forward to this visit and were, in fact, concerned on top of everything else with this horrific tragedy that happened in Las Vegas, that they would not get the president to visit, feeling like if he sees the challenges firsthand and brings the attention, he does have a way of cutting through the red tape and speeding up relief, so they very much wanted him to come.
You notice there's a bit of a checkerboard quality to this shot at times. This is not even a traditional satellite-beamed live shot, and again, that's a reflection of the fact that there is not a great deal of power on the island. This is sort of a very basic television lash-up that is beaming these pictures back live from Puerto Rico as President Trump and the First Lady Melania visit with the governor of Puerto Rico and other dignitaries who were there to meet him and show him just how bad things are. And things are bad. He has acknowledged that. It was a ferocious hurricane. But they are looking for more help in Puerto Rico, and perhaps the president's visit is going to get that for them.
Absolutely. Only 95% of the island, or 95% of the island does not have power right now. Only 5% does. Only 45% of the island right now has drinking water. So this is obviously a huge humanitarian crisis. Beyond that, there is so much rebuilding that needs to go on. And you can't forget, of course, that, this is part of our country. And like any other place that had a disaster, they need federal support.
And as you know, being the business reporter that you are, Puerto Rico was in horrific financial shape, essentially bankrupt, before the storm hit. And now they are faced with a catastrophic economic event that has, essentially shut down the island's economy. Tourists aren't going there right now and spending money. Restaurants can't open because they've been obliterated. So it is really the worst of all possible times on that island.
Absolutely. They were already in financial crisis, and when the governor has repeatedly been on our air, he has stressed that as well, that they were already struggling and needing federal relief and federal help. And now they have this crisis, like you said, tourism being the main industry, which is, now obviously completely hobbled. So tough times there. But the president has arrived to see the situation firsthand and provide some help.
All right, our Phil Keating is joining us now. He's looking back at the life of rock and roll legend Tom Petty. Tom Petty died yesterday in a Los Angeles hospital at the age of 66. He was a Florida boy, I believe. Am I right there, Phil?
You are right, John. He was born in Gainesville, Florida, where the University of Florida is, college town, and as a kid, all Tom Petty wanted to do was to become a rock star. And then he saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and he thought, that's how you can do it. So he packed up everything and moved to California. That is, of course, one of Petty's biggest hits. Who has not heard that song over the years? 1989's Free Fallin'. That was performed last Monday night at the sold-out Hollywood Bowl, wrapping up Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' 40th anniversary tour. Fans of Tom Petty and his Grammy Award-winning band gathered last night at their Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, paying tribute to the legendary rocker who first broke it big with 1977's bluesy groove, Breakdown. In all, the singer, songwriter, and guitarist turned out 30 singles that made Billboard's Hot 100 sales ranking. Here he is years ago explaining his songwriting process.
Whenever it comes, you have to kind of find your zone and just play. I just play my guitar, and if something comes up, I go with it. And usually the best ones just seem to materialize right in front of you. I wish I could tell you better, but it's so mystical. It really is.
Early Monday morning, paramedics. That is Don't Do Me Like That, another one of many hits for the megastar, rock and roll legend. Early Monday morning, though, paramedics responded to Petty's Malibu home, finding him unresponsive and in full cardiac arrest. He ended up dying last night at the age of 66. Now, Petty produced 16 albums over his 4-decade career. 11 of those albums went platinum. And for a little kid who wanted to just be a rock star, in 2002, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. John?
We're going to miss him. All right, Phil Keating in Florida. Thanks.
The investigation into the Las Vegas concert massacre and what police are now learning about the gunman, plus an in-depth look at the potential political fallout from the deadly shooting. More live team coverage next.